Well, good morning, my fellow conservatives from McLendon-Chisholm. It is great to be with you today, and welcome to another show. We're excited, or I'm excited to have you with me, and I want to first thank all of those of you who have sent me emails and encouraging emails to kind of spur me on. It's made a big difference, and I feel like we've come a long way. What's great is the knife-wielding man video that I created to build awareness about what's going on in our community has almost 500 hits already, and it's only been up for about 5 days. So that's kind of exciting. And I think if people start becoming more aware of the facts of what's really going on in our community, they're going to be more willing to really take a stand and speak up and speak out against things that are happening within our community. And that's the whole point. Today, I'm going to be focusing on specifically the propaganda that was put out by, of course, the former mayor of McLendon-Chisholm, Mike Donegan, and his political action committee that basically produced half-truths, misinformation, outright lies, and they mailed these things out. And today and every day, I've been going through different points that they have been making on these mailers, and this is one of them. This is the first. This is one of the first mailers I think that they sent out, and you can see for yourself. They're focused on where it says vote for strategic planning. They say the current city leadership gave away more than 4,000 acres of land to the city of Rockwall last fall. We need leaders with vision who will protect our city and not give it away. That was one of them. Then the second piece, which is this one, also kind of focused on that, giving McLendon-Chisholm land to Rockwall. The appointed mayor and council gave away more than 4,000 acres of land to Rockwall for nothing in return, which I guess is their new emphasis is we got nothing in return for it. And in fact, we got a whole bunch. We saved our city because of this decision. We saved our city from enormous apartment complexes, townhomes, high density developments beyond what the city of Rockwall would permit, and which means that we did get a great deal out of it. But those, again, you've got to remember that there are people in our community who don't care about protecting our wide open spaces, and they don't care about these things. They want more and more development. Their idea is more development means more tax dollars for the city, which means more amenities. What they don't recognize is that cities that have all of these things, that have the businesses coming in, their tax rates don't go down, they go up. There's not a necessary correlation between more business, more development, and lower taxes. In fact, it's just the opposite that occurs. That the more people that come into to a city, the more they want, the more they need, and we obviously are seeing a lot of that, especially in some of the higher density areas of the Rockwall community. So these things are just simply not true that they're perpetuating. And today I want to highlight for you why what they were saying about us giving this property away was just a complete lie when they are making an argument that we could have negotiated something, that we were able to get something back for that 4,000 acres. So let me begin. I think it would be a good idea to begin with what we're talking about so that you can see for yourself. This is a map of the city of McLendon-Chisholm, and you can see over here that this green area is all what's considered ETJ, extraterritorial jurisdiction. The 4,000 acres that we're talking about is right here. There's 1, 2, 3 tracks, 1, 2, and 3. This track right here is owned by a developer in Highland Park, and these two properties are owned by by people who live in Phoenix, Arizona. There are two different properties. Coke is one of these properties, and I think this is the Zeitling is the representation of the developer. Is who owns this. It adds up to 4,000 acres, and when you look at what when you look at what's being proposed here, you realize very quickly that this is a real problem, especially when what they're trying to do is basically eradicate. What these developers are trying to do is they are trying to basically do whatever they want to do with these properties. Now, one of the first questions that should be asked or answered is, how did so much property come into our ETJ? Because the state law establishes a city's ETJ for a general law type A city, which is what McLendon-Chisholm is, at about a half a mile from its border. So it's basically a halo around the city, which you can see. Everything it reaches out about a mile, unless, like right over here, this is Heath. So when it abuts next to a city, you have no ETJ, obviously. So how did this property become part of the city of McLendon-Chisholm? That should be a very important question to be answered. What's interesting is the minutes are very obscure. They don't detail exactly what happened in this transaction. So there's only one of two things that could have happened, and both of them are to the detriment of the city of McLendon-Chisholm. The first thing that happened is something similar to something similar to what happened in, I believe it's the Smiths. I think that's the name. It could be the Davis property. I'm not sure, but one of these property owners had negotiated with the city of McLendon-Chisholm to become part of the city. The first step to become part of the city is you've got to come into the city's ETJ. Well, so the property owner said, "Yeah, I'll come into the city." So they became part of the ETJ, and then the property owner negotiated with the city of McLendon-Chisholm to have what's called a 528 agreement. That agreement allows that property owner to live there tax-free, at least free from the city tax, from municipal tax, and just as they were before. So they'll come into the city just as they were before, but the 528 agreement establishes that if that property is ever developed, then taxation will come into play. And so if they sell the property to a developer, the developer is going to be within the city limits, and they'll be bound by the restrictions of the city. This could have been what was proposed for this 4,000 acres, that these landowners said, well, yeah, we'll come into your city, so bring us into the ETJ. Now, why would they want to come into our ETJ is the first question. Well, the answer is very, very obvious. They don't want to be annexed by Rockwall because they don't want to have to pay taxes. They don't want to have to conform to the city standards. I mean, if you're developing a large piece of property, you want as much freedom as you can have, and that's what these property owners clearly, either way, either of the options that I'm going to present, either way, they wanted to be free from being annexed by Rockwall because, unlike McLendon-Chisholm, which cannot involuntarily annex any property in its ETJ, the city of Rockwall, being a home rule city, can involuntarily annex property in its ETJ. So it would be a matter of time when the city of Rockwall encroached upon this property and just basically gobbled it up. The reason cities do it when it's raw land is very obvious, because if you try and annex properties where there's a lot of property owners, well, those property owners become voters. And typically, these kinds of property owners do not like being annexed, and typically they come out to vote. So the time to annex property for a city is when it is still raw land. So that is what these property owners, what these developer property owners wanted to prevent, was to be annexed inside the city of Rockwall. Now, they could have said to the city leaders, hey, we'll become part of your city if you let us do that. But of course, to come into the city, like I said before, you have to become part of the ETJ, and that's the first step. And there's no guarantee that they go through with that next step. So it's very possible that these property owners told the city leaders that, hey, we'll become part of the city. And then once they got into their ETJ, they're free and they said, we're good where we are. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that the city leaders had some relationship with these property owners. Maybe there was some transaction that took place. I have no evidence to prove that at all. I'm just simply saying, why would these property owners come in to the city's ETJ? They want to be protected, right? So they come into the city's ETJ. What benefit is there to the city of McLendon-Chisholm to have this much property come into its ETJ? It could be that the city leaders were thinking, well, eventually we'll be able to involuntarily annex. The problem is, and as I'll explain about a mud district in a moment, that is if that was their thinking, then that was the acme of stupidity when it comes to the realization of what you're dealing with. If they're not going to come into your city and you can't annex them, and you're not going to be able to annex them for years to come, well, there's not a lot that you can do. There's not a lot of control. However, there is one thing that the city of McLendon-Chisholm back then did have, and that was the power to require that those who are in the ETJ that are building meet the city's building code. So the standards of the city, which are much higher than what the county is, raw land, or the ETJ, would have applied. However, in 2016, right after I was elected, that summer, the Texas State Supreme Court determined that the ability for cities to require those within its ETJ to conform to the city ordinances for buildings was unconstitutional, and eliminated that power of cities over the ETJ. What power was left was what's called the power of subdivision, which, as any legislature, as any lawyer, as any developer will tell you, is absolutely no power at all. You have the ability to say yes to subdivision, and if you say no, you can appeal it, which typically almost all the time will get overruled, and the developer gets to do what they want to do. The reason the power of subdivision was not taken out after talking with a state legislator is because basically it's just basically a remnant from that, and the Texas legislature has just really not been on their radar. It's something that they will probably eliminate because of this state Supreme Court ruling. And when I say it's unconstitutional, I'm speaking of the state constitution. So in case someone's thinking that I'm talking about the United States Constitution, I'm talking about the state constitution. And if you're really in need of sleep, then I challenge you to crack that little thing open. It is a massive, massive document. This so with that in mind, how this got into our ETJ is a big question. Ultimately, what the city did by putting it into its ETJ is protect it from being annexed by big bad Rockwall, right? And now, with it sitting there, the landowner developers had absolute control to do whatever they want. And when I say they have absolute control to do whatever they want, the process, what's interesting, is that let me pull back on this map again. This property right here, the middle property, Coke property, they wanted to do what's called they wanted to put in a water district, which is the precursor to a mud district, Well, the mayor at the time was Gary Moody, and Gary Moody negotiated for months with Koch, with this property owner. The terms of the negotiation were behind closed doors, but we spent $18,000 in attorney fees to try and negotiate with that property owner. In the end, the property owner basically said, look, we don't have to negotiate with you, so we're not going to. That negotiation, those months of negotiation, you can see it in the meeting minutes where Moody talks about the negotiation in very subtle and very small bits and pieces without really detailing what the purpose of it is. And I suspect the purpose was to entice them to come into our city through a PID, a public improvement district, just like they did with Sonoma Verde. And to do that, I mean, a landowner is basically saying, okay, I'm gonna come into your city and basically give up a lot of my rights and power. The natural question to ask is, well, then why did Russell Phillips and Sonoma Verde do that? Well, it's very simple. Because half of his property, of the Sonoma Verde, what became Sonoma Verde, was in the ETJ, and half of it was already in the city. So the city had some power in that negotiation, and so did the developer. The problem is, when you look back at this map and you look at the amount of land that is there, that's about 1,300 acres. That is really not enough to create a true water district. And the cost to create a water district, the cost to create and to supply water to that area is estimated at around $40 million. You're having to create infrastructure. You're going to have to provide water. That's the key. If the city of McLendon-Chisholm, when Koch made this request of the city of McLendon-Chisholm to put in a water district, the city could have said no and said, no, instead we will provide the water district. We will be the water district. To do that, the city of McLendon-Chisholm literally has to be able to supply water. The city of McLendon-Chisholm it doesn't do water. You have RCH, you have these other independent non-profits, or not-for-profits, I should say, that are servicing the area. And I'm not sure that all of them are not-for-profit, just RCH, which Jack Pullen was the chairman. I don't know if he still is, but you have to provide that. Well, for the city to do that, you're talking about an investment for the city of about $40 million. So how is a city of our size able to do that? You can't. We can't. There's no way to do it. So Gary Moody was unsuccessful. He negotiated time and time again and was unsuccessful in securing a successful negotiation with this property owner right here, and ended up where the property owner just said, you can go pound sand. We're going to do what we want. We don't really want to be regulated by you. So, excuse me. So, when I became a member of city council, we received notice that we had a request for water districts in this property here and this property here. So you can kind of see what's happening. These two property owners are working with this property owner to create a water district so that they can cooperatively create a water district that will provide them the ability to create a mud district. And a mud district is essentially a city unto itself. When developers create a mud district, it is not part of a city. It's part of the county, but the mayor, the CEO, the head are basically the developers. So they can pretty much do whatever they want. And so long as they provide the mud district, they can do whatever the heck they want to do. Now, there's a process for them to have to do it. They have to put someone on the property. They have to put someone in a trailer. This is what happens in Texas. This is not This is not unusual. This is typical. And just so you know, I met with a land attorney specifically who does these kinds of land deals with cities and with developers, who knows the representative, the attorney for all three of these landowner developers. Her name is Missy Ventura. And she's been representing them for a long time. Missy Ventura is probably one of the best known land attorneys in the state of Texas. She is a very sweet and disarming person. She's small in stature, but she is a true shark, as I've been, and that's a compliment. So if you're an attorney, you know that's a compliment. She is ruthless. She is ruthless for her clients. She serves her clients incredibly well. One of her clients was Russell Phillips for the Sonoma Verde development. So her understanding of law of land law is very robust. The special attorney that I spoke with, the attorney that deals specifically with these things, made it very clear to me, made it very clear to others on the council, that we could delay this water district. We could kind of put some roadblocks. We could challenge. But unless we could provide the water, we didn't have a snowball's chance in hell of winning any lawsuit against these landowner developers. That was a matter of empirical and irrefutable fact. So the cost to the citizens of McLendon-Chisholm, if we had gone that direction, would have been in the $600,000 to $800,000 range, just to try and litigate because we'd have to have a specialist, someone who understands land law, and our city attorney's not a specialist, wasn't a specialist. That's real money. And to know that at the end we would have no success, that what it could do is delay the process, maybe a year, maybe a year and a half, made that option untenable, made it simply not an option for us. What were our options? Could we negotiate with these landowner developers? And what was interesting is we had a town hall meeting. We invited those who were in the unincorporated area of the county. And these are the people who live out here on 548. These are High Point Ranch, High Point Lake estates. They came out, and because they were concerned, understandably so, they were concerned that, hey, if we give that away, that basically, if we gave that to Rockwall, because that was basically my solution. I saw no other option. If these landowner developers wanted to create a mud district, there was nothing we could do to stop them. One of the things I said, and I didn't finish, about what the natural process of creating a mud district and creating a water district to move into a mud district is, you basically put a trailer on the piece of property that you want to put the mud district in. So you'd have somebody, you'd put a trailer on all three properties and have somebody live in each one, a different person living in each one, to establish residency. I think it's 6 months or a year. I'm not sure how long, but you basically pay a college student to live there and become a voter. Then that issue is placed on the ballot, and how many voters are there in each one of these areas? There's just one, and they're all paid for and provided by the developer. It's kind of the dirty little secret. It's not a dirty little secret either. It's just kind of the process that the legislature has allowed to take place. And so once they vote to become a mud district, it's a mud district, and there's not anything that any city or the county or the state can do, because it's a legal process and they've done it appropriately. Well, what is a mud district? Like I said, it's a city unto itself. How is it different from a PID? It's different in a couple of ways. First is, with a PID, those of you who are in Sonoma Verde, you know that there's two parts to your PID. There's the land, the lot portion, which is going to pay off your lot, and the other portion is the maintenance portion. With both a PID and a MUD, these are financing vehicles. These are ways that developers finance the infrastructure for their development. Because we're talking about the water district alone is $40 million. Your infrastructure is another $20, $30 million. So how do you fund that? Well, you basically get a bond. And the best way to do that is through a PID or a MUD, if you have established that. And so obviously the safest of those two investments, because it's marketed to the public, to the private sector. All of these bonds are privately held. So these are real investors that are investing their money in a long-term investment, a bond that will pay off when the development is built out. So to give an example, if you have a bond, and I'm going to bring this, make this very simple because I'm an Aggie. If you have a development that cost $100,000 to do the infrastructure, the water district, all that stuff, $100,000, and you put 100 homes on that property, basically what the bond will do, the MUD that you take out will charge each one of those lot owners a percentage of that $100,000. Since there's 100 homes, each one of them will basically pay $1,000 of that $100,000. Actually, it's a lot more than that. They'll probably pay they'll probably pay something like $1,500, because it's not just to pay back the bond, but it's also to provide funding back to the investor and provide funding to, it's a profit for the developer. So you basically apportion out however many homes there are. They divide that they divide the total cost by the number of homes, or lots, I should say, that are in that area. So for Sonoma Verde residents, I think the typical PID cost for you is around $20,000. That's average. I'm not trying to go higher or lower, or I'm just saying on average, what I can recall is about $20,000 on your lot. In a PID, once you pay that $20,000, you owe nothing more. And there are people in Sonoma Verde who have literally paid off that lot obligation to the PID, and they no longer have that part of the assessment. Now they just have the other part, which is the maintenance, the long-term maintenance. In a MUD district, they also have that lot to pay for, except they never get to pay it off. It goes in perpetuity. Can you see the benefit to investors to investing in a MUD district? What is the best way to make money in a MUD district? Well, obviously, you want as many homes as you can put on, or many structures, as many people paying for this MUD district as possible, because it's more revenue, it's more income to you. So when I'm going to go back one more step and just say that when these two properties, this property and this property, when those two properties made the proposal for the water district, the proposal included, let me go back to it, the proposal included an apartment complex to be placed right over here, right around here, and there's League Road. So it was right basically across from League Road where they wanted to put an apartment complex. This was part of the proposed water district that they were why they were requesting it. So if there's any question about what their intent was, there should be none. It's a documented, irrefutable, and incontrovertible fact. So if they were able to successfully get a MUD district, how much revenue would the city of McLendon-Chisholm have gained from these properties? Zero, because they're not part of the city. And why would they be? What purpose What possible benefit? I mean, think about it. If you're a developer, what possible benefit would you have by coming into the city of McLendon-Chisholm? Can you think of any? I can't think of any. And it's interesting because I've talked to a couple of developers who do this kind of thing, and they told me flat out, what you did by giving it to Rockwall was brilliant. One of the guys that told me that I talked to said, I would hate your guts. I would do everything I could to stop you, but man, I don't think they saw that coming. And sure enough, they didn't. Just so you know, when we did hand that property over, guess what? All three landowners asked for with the city of Rockwall. Could they put a mud district in? And the city of Rockwall said no. Why? Because the city of Rockwall can provide water. And the center property is not large enough to create its own mud district to make it profitable. It's just, and once it's in the city, and because it's in the city, they can't create a mud district because the restrictions by the city are going to prevent the apartment complexes. By the way, the comprehensive city plan for the city of Rockwall has already included all the apartment complexes that are necessary. So that's an important point. We had a public meeting where we invited, like I said, those who are outside of our city limits, who are in the unincorporated area, who were concerned that Big Bag Rockwall would come in and annex them involuntarily. Well, there's two reasons why that won't happen. Number one, they're a voting bloc, and the city of Rockwall probably doesn't want to do that. But even if they did, here is why no city on the planet in the state of Texas would ever annex High Point Ranch and High Point Lake estates. The reason why is because those roads, the roads and streets that are in those developments, those are owned by the county. The county of Rockwall, through the agreement with the developer, the development agreement, stated that if the developer of those two developments maintained the standard for streets, the county standard, that the county would take over ownership of those streets, and they would maintain it. So the county owns those roads. If the city of McLendon-Chisholm or Rockwall were to take on and annex those houses, those developments, the city would then have the obligation, because that obligation then transfers to the city. How much do you think that the county of Rockwall has saved in property taxes that have been paid from High Point Ranch and High Point Lake estates to ensure that when those streets start to come into disrepair, that there's money there? The answer is zero. Why? Because it goes into a big maintenance fund. And eventually the county will have to make some repairs, and all of us are going to pay for High Point Lake and High Point Lake estates and High Point Ranches streets. Think about that. Those of you who live in Sonoma Verde, again, it's funny that some of you out there think that conservatives like me and Adrian Balcom and Scott Turnbull and David Day are the big bad wolf, that we're the enemy. We're actually your best friend. We are. Think about what would happen if those properties, if those developments were annexed inside the city limits of McLendon-Chisholm. You're paying for the maintenance of your streets and road. Plus, then you would start paying more taxes because the city would have to accommodate. We would have to find a way to start preparing to pay the long-term maintenance of that. You think about what a burden that would be. So we had a meeting with citizens of McLendon-Chisholm, but there were a lot of people from High Point Ranch and High Point Lake estates. And boy, were they vocal. They didn't care about anything that I just said. They just thought we were stupid for handing that property away. They don't pay taxes. They don't vote, but they sure had their opinions about what we should do with property that is in our ETJ. What was fascinating to me and to everyone on the council was when he walked in, former Mayor Gary Moody walked in with Missy Ventura, the representative, the legal representative of all three property owners, the attorney for them. She was there to speak on behalf of the landowners. Of course, an attorney has no power to make any decisions, but she wanted to speak. That was one of the mistakes that I made as mayor. I made many, and that was one of them. I should never have allowed her to speak. I should have said, if the property owners want to come and speak, they can come and speak. But I'm not going to talk to an attorney. That was a mistake for letting her do that. Gary Moody, before she spoke, stood up. He sat next to Mrs. Ventura, by the way, throughout this meeting. He stood up and said, "I'm here to tell you that you can negotiate with these people. You can negotiate. I've done a lot of negotiation with Ms. Ventura on a lot of different deals, and I'm telling you, they're good to negotiate with. They're good people." It's part of the meeting minutes, folks. Go back and look. The recording, I still have the recording of that. Now, I ask a very uncomfortable question. Why was the former mayor of McLendon-Chisholm, who had gone through months of negotiation with one of these landowners, why was he there in cooperation with the landowners? Who was he advocating? My question really comes down to who was he advocating for when he was mayor? It's no longer a secret, because I revealed it when I was running for office, that Gary Moody held the insurance policy for the Sonoma Verde development and never made any disclosure about that conflict of interest. I'd like to know how much Gary Moody was being paid for coming to that meeting and for speaking on behalf of the landowners. What's even more interesting to me is sitting in that meeting was former Councilman Steve Hatfield. Mr. Hatfield, let me go back to the map. Mr. Hatfield lived on property that was, I think it's this property right here, one of these two properties. Mr. Hatfield's son, I should say, lives on one of those properties. I bet it was this one. It's one of these regardless. So he lives on one of these properties. It could be in the ETJ, I'm not sure. But went around to neighbors, and he told his neighbors that were also in ETJ or not in, he must have been in the ETJ because he voted. So, well, no, he didn't vote. I keep realizing, okay. Now I realize where my mistake is. Yeah, Mr. Hatfield lived inside the city of McLendon-Chisholm, and I think his house was somewhere over here, and his house was not part of the negotiation at all. Neither were his neighbors. There was only 3 properties that were the topics of this. But Mr. Hatfield's son went around to his neighbors and he told them that the city of McLendon-Chisholm is going to give them to Rockwall. And he said that my father told me this. I spent hours talking with citizens of McLendon-Chisholm, assuring them, telling them in no uncertain terms, the city couldn't give you away if we wanted to. You would have to want to leave the city, and the city would have to want to let you go. It's not even possible. But that misinformation was broadcast to neighbors. And Mr. Hatfield's son said it was because his father, former Councilman Hatfield, went around, had told him that this was happening, that his property would be annexed. A complete lie. And Mr. Hatfield should be ashamed for telling his son that and creating a frenzy of anxiety among citizens. So this whole thing is bad. And I'm not sure, and I have, again, I don't have any evidence to show and prove that there's some under the table financial dealings happening here, but I'm just trying to figure out what on earth, why former Mayor Gary Moody and Steve Hatfield would have, and former Councilman Steve Hatfield would have so much interest in these properties. What was going on? Why did they want to keep them in our ETJ, knowing that we had no power whatsoever to control anything that went inside that property? They had already proven by their actions that they weren't going to negotiate. They did that with Gary Moody, and yet he's coming to us and saying, hey, you can negotiate with these people? I'm sorry. Dry that out and fertilize the lawn. You know, I use common sense. There's a candidate who is campaigning as a common sense candidate, William Dahl, and I will show you that if he epitomizes common sense for the left, that you will see that there's no common sense whatsoever with people like William Dahl. There's no common sense. He is a guy. There's one thing that he doesn't have is common sense, and I will prove that in an upcoming show. And voting for Mr. Dahl is an act of stupidity if you think that he's actually someone who has common sense. Common sense does say that there's something going on. There was something going on. I can't prove it. I don't have any evidence to show it. But why else? I can come up with no other solution, because we had no control and they weren't going to be a part of our city. So those are the facts behind all of this land deal. We did give it to the city of Rockwall. The city of Rockwall cannot, by law, give us any. There can be no exchange for property. Now, I have heard, this is hearsay, so I want to be very clear. I've not heard it. I've not seen it in print, but it is my understanding that a former, I'll just say a former elected official is going around and saying that when we gave land to the city of Heath, we got $100,000, or we got money back from them. There was an exchange. What I would really like is for someone to produce video of him saying it, or audio, or where he writes it out in print. Because if that's true, I don't know if the law has changed since he was in office. Maybe it did. Maybe it was okay back then. It's not now. But common sense tells me that if it's not okay now, it probably wasn't okay back then, which is why I would like to see evidence of fact that shows that he is saying that. Because if he's saying that, well, then I think that's worth investigating a little bit further, that law enforcement should be asking some hard questions. Again, it could be, like I said, it could be that it was legal back then. I doubt it, but that's just me. So I hope that this is helpful to help you understand what has been going on, and why we gave that land away, and kind of the purpose behind it, because we were saving our city. We got a lot back. What we got back is the protection from high density, from apartment complexes, townhomes, and high density developments. The city of Rockwall has made no promises to us as far as legal written down promises where we can say and hold them accountable, because that, again, is not something that the law allows. It's a mutual understanding that we prefer that if whatever is built, that the lower density housing or whatever it comes in is at the closest end of our city borders, and the higher density it moves away from our borders. So they've been willing to say, yeah, this is what we believe too. Our comprehensive city plan reflects that, and so I would just say this: I would rather trust our neighbors in Rockwall than landowner developers who live in Phoenix, Arizona, or Highland Park. I think there is a mutual desire for our communities to be to enjoy what is left of our open spaces. That's why I support David Day and Adrian Balcom and Scott Turnbull, because these are people who don't just say that they believe this. These are people who have proven by their actions that they do believe this. So I think that's an important point that you can't forget. Do you judge people by their actions or their words? I hope you've been paying attention, and thank you for hanging in with me. If you have questions or comments, like I said, you can email me at conservatives for McLendon, conservatives4mc@gmail.com. So you can email me there. I'll respond if you'd like. But I do appreciate you being with me today. And tomorrow we'll be doing another topic. I'll be posting that soon about what I'll be talking about. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you can get updates and know when I'm going to do another show. So we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Thanks again. Bye-bye.